generations and generations, from generations and generations and generations of abuse, I have abuse in me, then I'm going to tend to resonate anybody around me that has abuse and tend to draw that out. And so in the human realm, we come to the next level, and that is that resonance creates motion toward. So if there's, I deserve to be taken care of and protected and cherished and honored, then I'm going to tend to attract from my environment people who play that out with me. Now, if I come from a family system that has a lot of abuse in it, an abusive parent or two, then I'm going to tend to hold that. The parent has transferred that to me, and it's going to tend to play out. As I learn to forgive that, instead of creating it in my life, you'll notice that if there was abuse early in life, it's probably still going on. Why is this happening to me again? Until I change my resonance, nothing changes. As I start to do that, then I change everything that I attract in my life. So this law of resonance is really a key. And so when I realize, let's say, for instance, I hate it when people rage at me, and here somebody violates one of my goals and I rage at them. What have I just asked for? What if I just said, world, send me somebody who knows how to, through the law of resonance, if I'm raging, what am I asking the world to send me? Somebody who's raging, and somebody's going to show up. That's how the law of resonance works. So it creates motion toward. So when I understand that, then I realize that what I'm feeling inside of me is mine to resolve. And what we're going to unfold over the period of study of the book, rather than getting into each person's specific issue, is what we're going to do is we're going to lay out the principles by which every person can understand exactly how it is that they've created what happened, whether you were 2 or 90, doesn't matter, and how today to go inside and change your resonance, change literally the frequency patterns that you hold. And the key tool we're going to cover here is the tool of forgiveness. Does that make sense to your question?
Yes, yeah,
Good,
I really
good.
want to change my resonance.
Okay, well, we're here to support you. Awesome. So we're going to unfold the tools.
Yeah. What I've realized that even if somebody was told me how to fix my problem, I don't think I'd still be able to do it. It's going through the worksheet and that essence that you feel, that something that comes up when you actually go through the worksheet for me, it's been the power of being able to change. I think if Michael said, well, Yinka, this is your problem and this is what you need to do, I think I would still struggle with the problem in a way of, it wasn't internal. It was Michael coming externally and telling me.
Right.
So that's what I've realized doing the tools.
Yeah, it's acquiring the tools and then using them. That's important. And that literally, when I'm in the game of blame, I'll take the energetic patterns that are inside of me and I'll formulate a picture of whoever it is that I'm blaming. And my pain and trauma will show up, massaged into looking like it's theirs. And I'll literally have a construct, a picture in my mind that shows me that the problem is theirs. Of course, when I stop and realize I'm the one that's feeling it, then I realize, so now there's a tool with which I can collapse this construct that has me believing everybody else is the problem, and I can take my power back. When I take my power back, everything changes. But as long as, every person has, at birth is issued the same amount of power. There are no people who are weak and no people who are strong. Everybody's issued the same. Those who are going to end up looking like the weak and the victims are people who put their power into their brain's image of others by blaming them. They've got the same amount of power as everybody else, but it's all wrapped up in the unconscious images of the people we've blamed. When I can surface those images in the presence of love and dissolve the falseness of them, I get my power back. It's kind of like country music. Have you heard what happens with country music when you play it backwards? You get your dog back, you get your truck back, you get your girl back. Well, forgiveness is kind of like that. You get to access and process through everything that never belonged, literally in your family system or in your own physiology, in your own psyche. And you get to remove those things. And as Yinka says, it's a practice, and every person, in order to achieve the result, has to do their own work.
I see it like going to the gym. You know, we all have to go to the, you know, do the exercise if we want that type of body or that physical strength. So Michael can't go to the gym for me. I
want to become a world championship weightlifter. And Grady, I want you to go to the gym every day and work out so that next year I can win. Good luck,
problem.
right? No problem. Okay.
Whatsoever.
You're on.
I'll read out this chapter from chapter 1, the dilemma. Your life has one thing in common. Every time it happens, you are there. You are the common factor. You play a part, consciously or unconsciously, in every event in your life. You may not have wanted those things to happen to you, but participated in it, yes. When you can see and take responsibility for your part in events, things will change. Responsibility is not a weight to carry, but a key to reclaiming your power. What causes our pain? What causes our pain? So we're just gonna, so you can put it into practice to write down, because Richard's dilemma in the first chapter, there was a guy called Richard. His dilemma was broken relationship and marriage. Have you had thoughts like, why is this happening to me again? Why are they doing this to me again? Why am I doing this to myself again? Why can't life just cooperate? Choose one pattern you have got going on in your life that you would like to look at today. So it's just kind of writing down what a pattern in your life, so that you can relate it to the story as you go through the session today.
Yeah, the most common feedback I get from the book that I meet, people who picked up the book, that I meet them 6 months or a year or 2 years or 10 years later, it's like, oh my God, I'm Richard. and I purposely wrote the book so people would be able to identify. He is not a real character, but he is a composite of many people that I've worked with over the years, and the stories and the key issues that come up are real issues with real people. So most people identify with Richard and they're right there with him. So it's a good thing. And you'll notice the bottom line of this one, he gives you the impetus to breathe. Mm-hmm. Breath is the key to what moves in your mind. Without the movement of breath, you don't get the movement of energy in your mind. And so when we invite you to breathe, we're suggesting that you just take the time to focus on and allow yourself to take a deep, slow breath. And what that happens is, what happens with that is it has a tendency to open the barriers that we built against looking at what's inside of us. In the ancient teachings, they said the veil of the temple must be rent in twain, and they interpreted that, at least in my recollection, they interpreted that as a purple curtain in the church is going to be torn in two. It wasn't what they were talking about. This is the temple. This body-mind unit is the temple, and the veil is the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious mind. It is built with the breath. It is opened with the breath. So each time we suggest and invite you to take a breath, allow yourself to do that and make it a habit to breathe continuously in your life. Most people subventilate most of the time, and that's because they're trying to hold back the flood of what it is inside of them that they don't want to look at and don't want to deal with. And the truth is, it's safe to look at and it's safe to deal with it.
I've definitely become more conscious of that now.
Good.
And it's how much I hold my breath, especially when I don't want to. I resist something. I know.
It is literally the way that we lock down energetic patterns of thoughts and feelings that we don't want to deal with. It's a way to stuff it down into tissue. And of course, the more you stuff it down, the more energy you put into it. The more energy you put into it, you realize the more amplitude there is with the wave that goes out from it. So the more I push something down, the more I'm sending out a signal to the world that says, hey, world, come and do this to me. I like to call it the psychic megaphone or the creative wave. Back 37, 38 years ago, I used to keynote several times. I keynoted at a conference called Global Science. And there was a gentleman named Marcel Vogel, who was a 23-year senior scientist from IBM. Marcel came to one of the sessions and he brought with him a camera actually that was created by a man named George Delaware out of England. And Marcel Vogel was the kind of guy that when he was 11 years of age, he invented and patented chemical light. If you go to a football game or a rugby game and they have this light stick, it's plastic, there are glass tubes in it, you bend it, it breaks the glass tubes, the chemicals mix and it lights up. So that was Marcel's invention when he was 11. His family did not have the money to patent it. He was 11, he patented it himself. The only reason your computer works is because Marcel invented the magnetic coating while he worked for IBM that allows your hard drive to store information. Yeah, that's Marcel's invention. So what he showed us with the Delaware camera was that with that camera, you could take a picture of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. Whatever we hold, especially the unresolved and shut down information, is what we're sending out most powerfully into the world. And somebody's going to show up in response because that's how resonance works. Resonance creates motion toward. So what we're inviting you to do is to breathe and rather than shutting that stuff down and pushing it out into the world so it shows up, moves toward you, what we're doing is suggesting that what you do is you breathe and you open and you let that come up inside of you. Now, for the things we've not wanted to deal with, that's not Dr. Feelgood. In fact, if we've been through hell, that can be hell. But when you stand in willingness and breathe and let it come forward, you stop pushing it out into the world. You stop inviting the world to come back with a response that matches, and you start to process through those energetic patterns. So that's what they're talking about when they say the veil of the temple. The barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious mind has to be opened. Otherwise, your whole life will be a reflection of your unconscious mind. You go back again into those ancient teachings. They said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. You notice they didn't say take care of your spouse or your child or your parent or your government or the president or anybody else. They said, take care of what's going on in your own unconscious, because that's where your issues lie. When you open the breath, you start to be able to access your own unconscious. When you clean out the unconscious, stuff stop coming to bite you in the butt because you're no longer sending out a message that says somebody's got to respond with that. And forgiveness is the key to the deepest opening of that veil. The breath is also the key. So you've got some notes about what your specific issue is.
And then go on to the next bit.
Let's go for it.
Looking at your emotions, so Richard emotions was frustration, anger, and fear. What emotions do you have attached to your dilemma? And after you write it, remember to breathe. Or as you write.
Kinga, could you give an example? Like, could you give an
So
example?
Richard, Richard is on his third divorce. The backstory is this guy calls me one day. We have a teaching center in the Ozarks in southern Missouri. I'm doing my intensive season, and this guy calls me one day and says, hey, I'm on my third divorce. I'm just leaving town. I'm getting out of town because, there's women that are the problem in my life. So I'm leaving, and I'm going to be driving by your center. And I wonder if I could buy and talk. Somebody told me about your work and said I might be able to help you. And so I invite him to do that. So he's on his third divorce, and, we're heading into the chapter where he's talking about how, these women, they're just, brutal, and he's got so much rage at them. So his feeling is rage and anger, and he's pointing it at the women in his life. So that would be an example. So what we're looking for you to do, we're inviting you to start to think about the issue that you're going to work on when we get to the worksheet process, or actually you've been in the worksheet session, so we'll get that started as we get through the first 3 chapters or so, and then we'll invite you to pick up the worksheet. Or remember that you can do this forgiveness process on your phone. All you have to do is go to your app store in your phone and type in the words Heartland, 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 Aramaic, Aramaic, forgiveness. You'll see an app that opens with a heart. That's our app. It's a very private app. We specifically designed it so that there were no permissions required other than the absolutely necessary. And that means the only permission, we're not interested in using your dialer or changing your settings or texting or taking pictures or recording or anything else. One thing, all it asks is permission to use the internet in order to work. When you complete a worksheet, you can print it as a PDF and save it to your phone, and it will ask a second permission, but that's the only permissions asked. So it's very private because people put very personal things into their worksheets. And so you can download that app. You don't have to have any paper and do the worksheet process right there on your phone. And if you have questions, there are all kinds of resources in the app. But if you have a question on any page in the app as you're going through it, like this question that just came up, if you're doing this step and you weren't sure about it, click a link and ask your question. Hit send. Jeannie will get that. The next day that we're doing a radio show, like if you send that on a Saturday, we do a radio show on Monday, Jeannie will read your question, we'll answer it, and then she'll send you back an email that tells you and gives you a link to where the answer is so that you've got your questions answered. So you can do that all from the app, as well as access all kinds of other resources.
Yeah, which I put all in the
Right,
chat.
you guys actually, Yinka shared it. Thank you, Michael, so much for everything what you just said. And thank you, Yinka, for sharing that.
Yeah, all the links for his site and stuff are on there as well.
Yeah, I see. Thank you.
So the next one.
So once again, as you start to notice your emotions, make sure that your breath is moving.
Mhm.
Why we tend to stop the breath? Because I noticed that I stopping that too.
It's
Like
the
when-
switch. It's the
Aha.
switch for shutting down what we don't want to feel, what we don't want to look at, what we don't want to deal with. If breath isn't moving, thought energy is blocked. Cleaning up thought energy is the key to healing. When we have thought disorders in our minds, we tend to create lives based out of those thought disorders. And then when life comes back and brings us something that resonates that thought disorder, what most people do is just shut the breath down.
Yeah.
So most people subventilate most of their lives. We want to help you reestablish the ability to breathe and to breathe all the time so that if something comes along that resonates something, it's safe to have it come up because you know you've got the tools to work through it and whatever it is. And sometimes it can be like old generational patterns. There's one link that Yinka's gotten. It's probably in her links now, but it's a very poignant piece of work that a woman who was in our codependence to interdependence workshop intensive online did. And she was dealing with getting ready to go to the hospital. She's in her 70s and she was having some heart difficulties. So her assignment was to ask her ancestors about what had happened with their hearts. And during the intensive, when she shared this, I was in tears as I listened to her. And then a couple of days later, she called into the radio show and shared it again. And once again, I was in tears. It's so profoundly powerful. But she literally, I forget whether it was her grandfather or great-grandfather had passed, but she started a dialogue with him. He came back with what happened in his life. And I think she said that they had come from Lithuania and they were starving there and they thought they were coming to the streets of gold and ended up in a place where they literally had to dig holes in the ground to live in. And, he shares with her his rage and his pain and the way he abused his wife and his children because he's so terrified. He doesn't know if the crops are going to grow, if he's going to be able to feed his children. But it was a very powerful dialogue that this woman had with her long deceased grandfather and was able to come to a state of peace with that. really brutal screaming rage that he had, and was able to come to a place of resolution in that particular process. So they're the kinds of things that underlie many of the things that, we look at this surface mind's picture and we see that Bill is the problem. We go, yeah, see, Bill's the problem in my life. Well, I had this problem with Harry and Mary and Hortense and George before that. It isn't Bill, it's what's going on in me. But when I don't want to own it, I close the breath down. I shut the switch down. I don't look at that. I create a picture of somebody else that's the problem in my life out of my unconscious data. That's why in the ancient teachings, they said, you must forgive from your heart the wrongs of your brother. The word heart there is not the physical organ, but the word heart in that Aramaic language is the unconscious. You must remove from your unconscious that which you put into your brain's image of everyone else. And the way we are able to maintain the belief that it's everybody else is by locking down and holding the breath, and then forcing the unconscious material to build this false picture of how it's everybody else's fault. The core of the forgiveness process is to collapse the false pictures. How do you know if you've got a false picture? If there is hostility or fear moving in you, then your mind is using corrupt data to build literally the construct of your mind, the world that you see. The most important skill you can have if your mind is showing you a world built out of corrupt data is the ability to collapse that construct. And that's what forgiveness does. And we'll get into that as things unfold. And the breath is a big key in the whole process.
Can I ask a question?
That
Go for
was
Um,
If it's based in the principle we're talking about, and we're moving
Yeah.
toward the principle, but I can't get into personal issues and
I get you.
why this or that. Okay.
Yeah, I get that. Okay.
Okay.
What if you're not blaming someone else, but you're blaming
No.
yourself?
No. This is so we're now getting into your personal
Yeah,
issue.
sorry, I just
And I want to refrain from that.
Yeah.
So blame is blame. It doesn't matter if I do
Oh, right.
myself, my parents, my kids, somebody out there. I can blame some fantasy person that never existed. It's all the same thing. Whether the blame's toward myself, the person I look at in the mirror, same principles for healing.
Oh, okay. Thank
Same
you.
principles. Yeah, right on. Cool.
Brilliant. Thank you.
All right.
So we'll go into the next bit of, have you felt any of these emotions previously? So you to acknowledge where and when. Have you felt those same emotions? Is it been triggered somewhere else? See if you can trace the patterns.
Just start to, there's a principle that we talk about of starting to step back from your mind, become the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the actions. If you are totally identified with what's going on in your mind and locked into it, it's like, well, it's all just automatic pilot and I have no real control. When I start to separate myself and I step back and observe this self that's playing out these patterns of hostility and fear, then I can begin to dissolve that self, literally. Again, if you go back to the ancient teachings, they said in order for you to live, you need to die. Now, we're not talking about physical death here. We're talking about the self that we've identified with, that the mind generates based in hostility or fear, has to go. We have to die to that self. And forgiveness weakens that self until it collapses. And when it collapses, it makes space for who we are as the active presence of love, literally to show up in our physiology. And that's what this work is about, literally showing up fully in your life as who you are. And the truth of who you are. If you've ever held a newborn, just tap into the essence of the newborn. And it's really simple. The newborn is love. That's what you are. That's what I am. And when we recognize that, we create a whole different life, a whole different world. So starting to look at the patterns, gee, when did I blame somebody other than Bill for this? Oh, yeah, I remember. Oh, yeah. Gee, I've been doing this since I was 3. Oftentimes that's about the stage these patterns go back to. And again, previous generations established those patterns, so they're easy to fall into. it takes some significant committed work to step out of those patterns. And that's what this work is about. And of course, once again, we have a reminder at the bottom of the page to breathe. Move on to the next one.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, so fortunately, these things can pass.
Yes.
It's always important to put in, to remember.
Yeah. Definitely. You know, that brings up one of the tricks of the mind, of the mind of the body, is that whatever's moving in it at any given moment, it's kind of like the mind convinces us that this is permanent, that this is it. And the mind is as changeable as the weather, if you haven't noticed. If you haven't had the tools, perhaps you haven't been able to change it in the direction you'd like to be changing it all the time. But you'll notice again, unless you're just a generally miserable person, when everybody's doing everything you want them to do, you're pretty happy. Well, if you've got hostility or fear in there, somebody's going to come along and violate a goal that you have, and that hostility or fear is going to come up. And what you can do with forgiveness is, rather than just having to sit around and wait for them to pass, is you can actively remove them. And that's what the word forgive means, remove. It's about removal of what doesn't belong. It's got nothing to do with the Greek idea of, I'm going to let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me. And by the way, you can, if you haven't read the book yet, you know, it's available usually pretty expensively on Amazon and YouTube, used copies. It's out of print, so I can't sell you one. But you can also go to our website, and in 8 different languages, you can download the book free. It's in Farsi, it's in German, it's in Spanish. We've got it in Swedish, but the Swedish publisher wouldn't let us put it online. What other languages? Anyway, we've got it Dutch, several different languages. So
I do recommend the book because there's just something about holding a book, reading the book, and just internalizing it, that physical thing in your hand.
yes.
I
And
recommend it.
You can download it and you can print it off too. So
I recommend it to my brother, but what I actually found out is not in that language, so he can't actually read it, but he really needs it. So if you're ever going to do it in a Slovak language, that will be really great.
okay. Well, if you'd really like your brother to have the book in your
Yeah.
Slovakian language, maybe it's time for you to translate it. And we'll
Maybe
put it
not,
online,
yeah.
and we'll acknowledge you for doing it. You know,
Right,
all the
okay.
translations are there were done by people whose lives were impacted. They said, I'm going to translate this so other people in my language can have it. So if that fits,
Yeah, you're right.
that would be awesome.
Mm-hmm. I can look maybe into that.
Okay.
And
Well,
the level of learning
if you're interested in doing that, drop my wife Jeannie a note, and it's JEANIE at whyagain.org. Jeannie at whyagain.org. And I know you want to do it. It was kind of fun. About 2 years ago, we were doing the radio show, and Jeannie got an email. She reads this email on the radio show, and a fellow in Holland had gotten the book online free and downloaded, started doing worksheets, changed his life. And we'd never heard of him, you know, didn't know who he was. And she gets this email, and he said, and here's the whole book translated into Dutch. So now we've got a Dutch translation on our site. So anyone who wants to support it, our commitment, what we're ultimately looking to do is to make these tools available to every mind, heart, and being on the planet as freely as we possibly can. So if anybody wants to translate it, we'd be delighted to have the support, and you'd be acknowledged on the site for doing it.
and the level of learning in heighten, isn't it? If you're saying reading it in a different language as well, your level of learning is going to expand even more as well.
Absolutely. Yes. But also passing these tools to other people who needs it, you know, same as I do, or like it is a rewarding. So yeah, let me look into this. Oh. It's just like a challenge also, like make
awesome
to translate it in the right way, like to really translate it as it is and not changing anything in it.
Well, you know, I recognize, having come out and worked with the Aramaic language And in order to explain what I can now explain about why and how forgiveness works, it took me literally 35 years of working with it. And the translations that are online, aside from English, I don't have any way of being able to tell because I don't speak those languages. I just assume that somebody's translated with integrity and is really, creating support for people. But there are, there's a saying called lost in translation. And there's certain things that are not easy to say. I mean, there are ideas in the Aramaic language. There's nothing in the Greek language, which most of the translations that come into the Western world are from the Greek or from the Latin. I mean, there aren't even words to represent them. There are no words in English for so many concepts that are there. And so what we've attempted to do is to develop a language, but there's some ideas in Aramaic that it takes one word to say in Aramaic, but it's a whole paragraph to speak it in English. And, so I don't know about every other language, but it'd be awesome if you would. That'd be cool.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for considering it. So acknowledge where and when you felt the emotions previously.
And then it's going to go into chapter 2. What causes your pain? Your mind makes it look like the source of your pain is outside of you. To think the cause is external is confusing the triggers for pain. Just because you leave doesn't mean you're not in the same place. I'm definitely learning this one.
Yeah, the geographic here doesn't work very well, that's for sure. So the key point of this chapter is to recognize that pain is a warning signal. It has a very specific purpose. If you've been in denial, hiding parts of your mind from yourself, the purpose of pain is to make your ears grow, to get you to listen and to watch, observe, and see what's really happening. So pain is nothing other than a warning signal that you've put an energy into your structure that doesn't belong there. That's all it is. And the reason why pain is so important to me, I mean, as a doctor, the reason that it's so important to understand the purpose of pain is to recognize that all it is a warning signal. On an energetic level, it's a warning signal that there's an energy there in you that doesn't belong there. And it's an invitation for you to address whatever that's about. Now, of course, you can't address it if you don't have the tools. So, and oftentimes people say things like, this is kind of tongue in cheek, but, I got $5 in 5 minutes. Tell me everything you know, everything you've learned in the last 50 years. Based on what was taught 2,000 years ago in the Aramaic language. It doesn't happen that way. If you're willing to dedicate some time and some real energy to your healing process, I mean, what we're literally talking about here is literally the question of all of the philosophers and theologians of all of time have been looking for the answer to this question. You're not going to get it for $5 in 5 minutes. However, the whole body of work is here to support you understanding it if you're willing to invest in it and take the time to do the work. But it requires doing the work. It requires the willingness to step in and walk through what it is that needs to be healed. And all that pain is a warning signal that there's an energy in your structure that does not belong within your human structure. That's all it is. And it is self-created, all of it. Now people say, well, no, the doctor told me it was because this organ is deformed. Well, you're right. The organ is deformed and there's pain. But I'll offer that if there were not error energy within that organ, it would not be deformed. And when you remove the error energy, that organ will rebuild itself. Now, if you've got an energy that's been going on that comes from 20 generations ago, you're probably not going to work through that today. You're going to start on it. In fact, if you go back to the fellow who originated this Aramaic forgiveness process, some of the people who were following him said, well, how many times do we have to forgive our brother? I mean, is 7 times enough? That was the question. Like, is that often enough? And in Aramaic, his response was, no, actually 77 times 70. How often will you need to forgive? Numerology, 7 is the number, 0 is the number of complete, or pardon me, 0 is infinity, 7 is the number of completion. How often will you forgive any given painful energy that you hold in your structure? An infinite number of times until you are free of it, until you're complete with it. We had a woman that called into the radio show on Tuesday, I believe it was. And back about 22 or 23 years ago, she did our teacher training. And we were in Miami, and she's Spanish speaking. And she did the Why Is This Happening to Me Again in Spanish, workshop in Spanish, while I did it in English for a Spanish English audience. It was pretty cool. And she was sharing, there's a place to number your worksheets. She called me saying she wanted to call into the show, that she was very excited about an opening that she had in a worksheet that she did. So she gets on the show and she's sharing this insight and the shift in her life. This is after 23 years of doing the work. And I forget exactly what the number was, but she shared that this was worksheet number, I think it was 4,370 or something like that. That's how many worksheets she'd done. So that 23 years later, she could have this wild opening experience with her daughter that she never could have imagined would happen. I'll say that personally, having developed this work and been doing it personally, actually stepping in and doing the work, that the last 2 years for me have been some of the deepest, most profound, and most important internal work that I've done. And I've been doing it and developed it for 50 years. It's a lifetime of work. If you're interested in, $5 in 5 minutes, this probably isn't for you if you need the quick fix. But if you're really interested in getting to the question of the ages and getting to the key tool that changes everything, then all of that technology is here. And we're delighted to share it with you. What causes your pain? Thought disorders. If you go to the opening words in the book of John, in the New Testament, and this, by the way, is not a religious text, and this whole thing has nothing to do with religion. Men made religions out of it, but it's actually physics, physiology, psychology, and genetics when you go back to the Aramaic. But if you go to the opening words there, they tell us in the Greek translations, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. Not even close to that in Aramaic. If you go to the Aramaic language, what it says is, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. Now, here's what the cell biologists are telling us now, 2,000 years later. When you think a thought, that thought becomes a neuropeptide, an actual molecule in your body. Something that wasn't there a second ago with this thought is now what we call physical. Now, it's still energy. It actually isn't physical. There's no such thing as physical. There's only energy. But it appears in the realm that we call physical. That neuropeptide, which is the solidification of a thought, now circulates around in the structure until it finds a receptor site on a cell that matches it. And it lands on the cell. And if we were looking from inside the cell, it inserts itself in the cell. And we would call that, if we were looking from inside the cell, when that neuropeptide lands, we would call the energy that's coming into the cell chemistry. It literally becomes chemistry in the cell. Mind energy becomes flesh. Now, if that mind energy, if that neuropeptide is of a disintegrative nature, then the tissue that it lands on, the cell, is going to become chemically deformed. There's going to be abnormal chemistry in it. And if that stays long enough and is reinforced often enough, that cell may end up a total tragic mess. Here's the skill we're inviting you to develop. And I can only say this because I've been working with this for a half a century. The skill we're inviting you to develop is a skill in the ability, instead of living in denial and blaming everybody else for what's going on in your cells, that you literally develop the ability to extract that neuropeptide from the cell. You are able to look at it, decode it, understand it, and throw it away. That's forgiveness. We're talking about what happens on a chemical level in the structure. So 2,000 years ago, this man, Yeshua, they call him Jesus. His name wasn't Jesus. Hail Zeus was not his name. It was Yeshua. And he wasn't a religious figure. Men made him one. He was a physicist. He was a physiologist. He was a geneticist. He was a psychologist. He knew exactly how it worked. And so the act of removing from the cell the neuropeptide, confronting it in love and removing it is called forgiveness in Aramaic. You can see how degenerated that teaching has become because we live in a world that says forgiveness is about how this is all your fault that I'm feeling this pain. I have nothing to do. It's your fault, but it's okay. I'll let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me. Such a silly, degraded idea of forgiveness. And so what we're looking to do is restore that original idea. There's only one thing that can cause pain in your physiology, and that is an energy that doesn't belong there. Whether that energy was introduced through your genes, they say there's a genetic disorder. If you develop this skill, you'll be changing your genes and the gene expression. You'll be changing the mind energy, the thoughts, and the feelings that reflect from that mind energy. You'll be removing what doesn't belong so that the cell, and the instant you remove the distorting energy that creates the distortion in the cell goes back to its normal structure. Like that, it's energy. It's not physical. You got to get past this idea of physical and physical disease. If we listen to Einstein, here's the whole root of the workshop or the book. And by the way, last Saturday, I did a 3-hour Why Is This Happening to Me Again live workshop. And it's posted on our website. If you go to events, you'll see a link to Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And so you can do that whole workshop live. It parallels the book. The book just gets into a different perspective, more personal with this character, Richard, walking him through the process. But it'll be a powerful complement, and it's a free, open, you can download the video, you can share it, what have you. So what causes pain? Mind energy doesn't belong in the structure. What do I need to do to resolve my pain? Develop a skill of removing the mind energy, wherever it came from. Oh, I deserve to be hurt. I'm a victim. I'm no good. I was supposed to be a boy. I was supposed to be a girl. I should have done this. Whatever it is, it's about confronting the thought disorders, learning to remove them, and learning to live as active present love, no matter what they do. To be able to stand, Yinka, with your daughter and whatever she does, to hold to the space of active love. My granddaughter, we raise our granddaughter 3 days a week, and she's now 3.5, almost 4. And what she's taught me, and I knew this when I was raising my children 40 years ago, but I've gotten it on a whole different level. She's taught me to recognize who she is as love, and to recognize who I am as love. And that my only job with her is to keep the space open where I only see her as who she is. Whatever's going on in her genes, in her family history, whatever moves in her is one of those little ones. And, they talk about terrible twos. Well, fortunately, we haven't had terrible twos with Arya. But what I've learned is my job as a grandparent, and it was the same job when I was a father. I didn't realize it as deeply. I wish I had when my kids were small, is to only see her as love, and to recognize that if something she does brings something to activity in me that's less than love, it's my job to instantly process through that, to remove that, and come back to seeing her as she is, out of who I am. And we both get to it's just amazing. It's just absolutely amazing when you realize that's your job as a parent. And guess what you need to work through to do that? Every hostility and fear that's ever passed between generations in your bloodline. And it's an ongoing process. That's why it isn't a Dr. Feelgood process, and that's why it isn't instant. It takes some commitment and work. But that's what we're here for.
Thank you. I know, because I have had some people in the group say that they don't not come in because it takes up too much work. And they want more of a quick fix. They want something that's quicker.
I recognize that after 50 years of teaching this. I recognize that dilemma well. And it's interesting. I've seen it take 10 years for somebody to come back and go, what was that you said? So, once the seeds are planted, people start to shift and change, and each in their own time. I've learned as a teacher that my job is not to make sure they get it. My job is to present it in the most effective way possible and to create support for people understanding it and being able to use it. But I can't take responsibility for who's ready to use it and who isn't, and who will and who won't. I'm just here to present it, radiate it, support it. That's my job. And I've had to clean up some of my own frustration and anger about, well, I gave this to you. Why aren't you using it? That's an opportunity that will come.
Click to the next one. So what is your inner dialogue? What are your repetitive thoughts about your dilemma? So start recognizing what those repetitive thoughts about your dilemma.
Now, there's a thing we call silent speech. In our Laws of Living course, we talk about a thing we call regulatory speech. And regulatory speech is a speech that regulates your physiology, your psychology, your gene activity, and your behavior. And, if you go back again 2,000 years ago, this physicist who understood how all this worked said the power of life and death is in your words. Words are frequencies, they're energies. And so what's the inner silent dialogue? We tend to hear speech in the outer world. We tend to repeat that speech by speaking it out loud. We tend to turn that into a silent dialogue inside. And if the silent dialogue is experienced to reduce stress, then it will become unconscious speech. And most people's behavior and lives are run by their unconscious speech system, the regulatory speech system. So this work is about becoming conscious. So here's the step to start to pay attention. Many people will tell me that, oh yeah, I do worksheets, but I just do them in my head now. I've got them memorized. Well, I have a little song that I sing to people who do worksheets in their head. And it's an old Neil Simon tune. Slip sliding away. The nearer your destination, the more you slip sliding away. The closer you get to the core of what you need to deal with, the farther away your non-being mind is going to want to get from that and not have to deal with it. When you do the worksheet in writing, and I suggest that you have a notebook there, and you really start to pay attention to your thought, you start to see this silent speech, and you start to get into your unconscious speech. Most people are shocked when they start to see it. It's like, oh my God, I never knew that was going on inside of me. That's what runs most people's lives. And so part and parcel of this, if you do it in writing, and I'm saying this from personal experience, having done worksheets in writing and doing them in my head, is that I notice that there are subtle things that I catch and I'm able to open up when I do it in writing, that my mind is able to just kind of go, don't pay attention to that. And it just like, it's gone in an instant. When you're writing it, it's a different process. So, and that doesn't mean don't ever do them in your head, but make sure you take especially the core ones and do them in writing. And of course, gee, there's a reminder at the bottom of the page to breathe. You'd think that was something important, wouldn't you?
Once you recognize your inner dialogue, then it's our internally generated realities and the nature of our continuous silent dialogue operate consistently and automatically, informing the basis of our decisions in life, even the seemingly unimportant or trivial. Is your self-talk on what you want or you don't want? I noticed that I'm having arguments in my mind for people that aren't even there. I've just had an argument with them and I'm taking that argument through the rest of the day. Yep. And I have to stop myself today. I was like, she's not even here. You're arguing with yourself.
Well, we populate our inner world with all the people that we think are out there. and we carry them around in here. It's like, you know, we've rented space out to all these people and we don't even charge them for it. Why would you do that? Start kicking them out of your mind. The only person that belongs in your mind is you. And then instead of generating, and you see these words are internally generated realities. We've talked about this before, but let's bring it in here. We've been taught, you and I, and everybody I've ever known believes it, that we look out and we see, you know, there's a television, there's a picture, there's a wall, there's a light, there's a computer, there's a camera. We see all those things out there. That's a total fraud. You have never seen anything with your eyes, and you never will see anything with your eyes, because eyes don't see. Now, remember, my background's in the world of physics. Eyes are antenna. Antennas don't see. Antennas pick up frequencies. So the eye picks up frequencies of light, and there's information carried on that light. That information is fed to the brain, and according to what is resonated in the brain by that information, remember, resonance causes motion. According to what's resonated, the picture world that you see, you have this converter, this digital to analog converter. Analog means picture, digital means information. You've got all this information, and when it moves, it's converted to pictures. And so this picture that we see, that we think is out there, is actually structured by our minds. It's a construct. That's why, you know, you go to the courtroom where 6 different people are there to testify about the accident, and you wonder if any 2 were at the same accident. Well, they all experienced the same actuality, what actually went on, but each person's reality was unique and individual, a construct of their own minds. There's some interesting Harvard research that says that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells fire, the max amount of data that goes into generating your perceptual constructs is 9 bits. That's all you get to see, is 9 bits of data out of 10,000 brain cells firing. And it's been estimated that in that same time frame, which is about a 25th of a second, that there are perhaps as many as 20 trillion bits of data happening in the world of actuality. So here we are with perhaps a 20 trillion bit world, 10,000 brain cells firing. We're looking at 9 bits of data, and we think we know what's going on out there. Good luck. Every reality generated by your mind always tells you more about the content of your mind than the world that you think you're looking at. You have never seen anything with your eyes. You will never see anything with your eyes. As you do your forgiveness work and remove corrupt data from your mind, you will upgrade your perceptual system so that your perception becomes more and more and more accurate about the actuality. And even if your perceptual system is 100% accurate about the actuality, you're still not experiencing what happened in the world. You're still experiencing a construct of your mind. Forgiveness collapses that. And then you get to the point where there's, instead of degraded perception where I put all kinds of hostility or fear in it and it's all corrupt data, getting to the point where, oh, it's all connected and it's all based in love and it's all true, which still isn't the actuality, then I'm creating a space where the actuality can come in and show me itself. And when it shows me itself, it rewrites me. It restructures me. The actuality, truth, what is, will totally and completely restructure me. But it can't restructure me if I have a story from the past, from my generations, or my power person dynamic when I was 2. It can't restructure me if I'm insisting that this is the way it is. What we're going to show you is a tool with which you collapse the constructs of your mind, especially the ones that are based in hostility and fear. And when you do that, you get to access the underlying hostility and fear directly, and you get to remove it from your structure. That's forgiveness. When you remove dis-ease energies from tissue, the dis-eases in tissue disappear. Forgiveness is the key tool. So listen, start to pay more attention to what's going on in your silent speech, and then start to gain an entryway into your unconscious speech. Unconscious speech will oftentimes show up just the instant after you do a worksheet. You get to the core step. That's where you'll touch into things that you go, oh my God, where did that come from? And that's when you'll start to process through those things. And again, these are generational voices. These are things that have gone on forever. And, you know, the antenna is a one-way valve. Information comes in, you see with the brain. Actually, my granddaughter, Ari Rain, I was telling about, she's, you know, almost 4, and she, through having swallowed a button, us explaining it to her, she just decided she loved anatomy and physiology, and she'll sit and watch for 45 minutes at a time a university level anatomy class. She'll just sit and she's totally glued to it. And last week she was making some Play-Doh body parts. She just is really taken by the human form. And she made some parts, and she said, Papa, let's go watch that YouTube video with the body parts. And so we do. And it's on the Kids Learning Tube, really cute educational channel for kids. And there's an outline, a cartoon outline of a body, and all the body parts are there. And they all kind of dump out onto the floor. And then they start a song. Each body part sings and tells you what they are. So the eyes come up, and so the eyes come up, and they're cartoons. They've got a little face, and they sing. I am your eyes, I am your eyes, I see the world around you. And Arya Rain says, they don't understand. We don't see with our eyes, we see with our brain. She knows that at 3.5. It's like the kid's been listening. It's pretty cool. So in the same way that you couldn't go and take the antenna off the back of your TV set and look in it and look back to the cable channel and see what's going on in the control room, or look up through the antenna and see your neighborhood through the antenna on your roof, you can't see through your eyes. It's not possible. But the eye does bring information in, and your mind structures your world. If you don't like your world, you've got to go inside and change it. And as you say, there are a lot of people who, well, just give me a pill to do that with. Not going to happen. It's a set of skills that have to be developed. And that's what we're here to support.
I have to admit, though, there's moments where I think, oh, I just want a quick fix. I don't want to do the work today.
I understand. I understand. I actually feel blessed in that, in a way, I chose to do this work. In a way, I was kind of forced into it by circumstance. And I recognize that if I hadn't done this as my livelihood, chosen it back 50 years ago, I never would have done the work. I recognize that my mind was too lazy. I wouldn't have done it. But, you know, the fact that I had to teach it over and over, I mean, the main workshop, why is this happening to me again? I've taught that as many as 3 times in a day. So, you know, it kind of was like forced learning. And I feel so blessed that I chose that path.
I feel very blessed that you did. I wouldn't have got
Delighted.
Let's become the next one. So until you take charge of your internal reality structures, you are bound to keep re-experiencing whatever you are that's meant to be trying to avoid.
No.
Then breathe.
Yeah, the more I try to avoid it, the more I say I don't want to feel this. I mean, what is it that causes feelings? It's only energy moving inside of you. You can't feel something out there. So the only thing, and we're going to get into that later in the book, that causes feelings is what's moving inside of you. And so if you're trying to avoid it, there's only one way to avoid it, and that's to face it and process it out. Because pretending it's not yours and that it's somebody else's and it's caused by, that's just going to lead to more frustration and more failure. You can't, you know, when you realize that what's happening inside of you is happening inside of you, everything changes. Most of the world believes that what's happening inside of me is caused by something out there. No, what's happening inside of you is happening inside of you. Your speech system is connected to it. Your whole perceptual system is connected to it. Forgiveness is what allows you to change the whole game. And breathe.
So how do you create change you do want? The first step is to correct your internal dynamics, change your thoughts about new ideas, and let go of the chatter in your head that keeps you from hearing them. Next step is the process of changing your internal reality, is be responsible for your self-talk. If it doesn't change, then the experience keyed to your old thought will keep repeating.
And that's a really important key, because most people think that when they're being asked to take responsibility, that the word responsibility means this is my fault. I'm the guilty party. I'm the one who's to blame. You notice when you get to the worksheet, it says no fault empowerment process. There's no fault. No, we're not saying you're to blame. We're not saying you're guilty. We're not saying you're at fault. You'll notice in the word responsibility, there's nothing about guilt, fault, or blame. But that's what most people have hooked up in their reality structure. So when you say take responsibility, that's the structure that comes up out of the mind. I'm to blame for this? No, you're innocent. The truth of the being that you are is you're innocent. And when you take responsibility for the energetic patterns that you hold, the child who came in with abuse in the family and was terribly abused now starts to realize there are thoughts of abuse that they can take responsibility for and throw out and put an end to this pattern, so their children and their children and their children don't have to do it. We don't have to participate consciously in the dynamics that we create out of. All we have to do is hold those energetic patterns. And when you realize you hold those energetic patterns, it's time to work through them. Now, the world tends to confuse the trigger for something in us with the cause of something. So when I say to somebody, you made me, what I'm trying to say, I'm living in a state of denial. And this is a key word in this work, is denial. And our definition of denial is when I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me. I have to hide the real cause of what's moving inside of me. What we call that is dissociation. So when I say, you made me mad, remember, the mind's an evidential device. You only get 9 bits of data out of 10,000 brain cells firing. When I say you made me mad, here's what I'm actually saying to my mind. Mind, I know I've been through this anger 87 different times with 42 different people. I know it's all mine, but don't you dare show me anything that would reflect that I have any responsibility here. Show me that it's all Harry's fault out there. My mind will dutifully follow my instructions. It will hide the real cause of what I'm experiencing. Again, we call that dissociation. And what I dissociate from, I energize by pushing it down. And I build a picture of them. And now I believe, because I see that it's them, that it really is them. But once again, I've been through it 87 different times with 42 different people. Maybe sooner or later, I need to start to acknowledge that maybe this is mine. Maybe it's about me. So when I recognize that, then I have the ability to step away from that denial game and that dissociation, because here's what happens when I blame somebody else and I dissociate from the content of my own mind. By dissociating from it, I've energized it. Let's imagine that I've got a 3-foot diameter spring that stands 3 feet high right here on the floor in my office. And sitting on the floor, it can't do anything. But if I go over and push it down and lock it, and push it down and lock it, and over a period of years, push it down and lock it, push it down and lock it, push it down and lock it, and I get 2 or 3 you big people, guys, to come up here and give me a hand and push it down and lock it. When I let the lock off, what happens? There's a lot of potential energy stored in it. If for years I've been denying ownership for something that's moving inside of me, and pushing it down. Remember I talked about Marcel Vogel and his camera? You could take the picture of the high energy waves. The more I push it down, the stronger the amplitude is of the wave that sends out a resonant field that's going to draw somebody in to do it to me. And I'll be so shocked when they do it to me again. That's why that one chapter says, doesn't matter where you go, there you are. You take it all, you take your whole mind energy system with you. So when I deny and I dissociate from the real cause, hide it from myself, I send it out into the world, somebody's going to show up, pardon me, and they're going to tend to be resonated into activity by that energy field as they get closer and closer to me. Have you ever gone into somebody's space totally committed to being loving and nurturing and caring, and then you get within 10 feet of them and all of a sudden you're functioning like a mad banshee? It's like, what the heck happened? Well, oftentimes you walked into their field that was so strongly demanding abuse, and you had such a strong abuse energy in you that resonance brought that abuse up. And all of a sudden, having been committed to being totally loving, nurturing, and caring, you fall into the abuse pattern because that's the energy that's been resonated through that energetic exchange. So when I dissociate from content, I draw somebody, and now they do behavior, and their behavior resonates what I've dissociated from. So now the dissociated content I project, I create a picture of them. And so here they are with what I've tried to hide from myself, and I literally take that data, that information, and make an analog image of them out of it. And I see that it's really their fault. But once again, I got to remember, I'm the one who's feeling it. And you can't feel anybody else's. So you're going to have to touch the mainspring of your thinking and begin to change and shift your thinking. And I'm not talking about, there's a thing it's gathering a title of toxic positivity. Actually, in my book, I wrote about it 27 years ago, and I called it premature positive thinking. When I start trying to pretend that something's true that isn't, I'm in trouble. So this isn't about positive thinking. It's about honest and appropriate thinking. If there's something traumatic going on, I need to open. I need to be willing to embrace it. I need to be willing to work through it. And so we're not looking to be premature positive thinkers. We're looking to be honest and appropriate thinkers, and, to function as love. And, one of the things love can do that hostility and fear can't do is love can have the really hard conversations. Love can stay present as love during the conversations that hostility and fear go berserk over. And that's a skill you want to develop, to be able to function as love in any conversation. And to do that, you have to work through and let loose of all hostility and fear that otherwise would come up and tend to interfere with what's going on. And the core tool, and we teach about 30 different tools, but the core tool here that we'll be getting into with the book, we'll touch into the commitment from the Healing Through Relationships workshop. But the core tool, again, is that of forgiveness. And again, what forgiveness does is it collapses perception. When it collapses in on itself, it creates a pathway into the unconscious. This is something I didn't understand for 35 years of teaching this work. Here I'm telling people to cancel their goals. They're going, what are you, crazy? Why would I do that? It's a perfectly good goal. Why would I cancel it? What's wrong with that goal? Nothing's wrong with that goal. The word forgive in Aramaic is shabak. It means to cancel. I cancel a goal not because there's something wrong with the goal, not because I don't want what the goal represents. I cancel the goal because I recognize that every time I put it in my mind, it resonates some form of disintegrative energy. It resonates corrupt data. And I'm in trouble if my perceptual system is degraded by corrupt data. So I want to restore myself to love before I start putting that goal back in again. And, I finished this worksheet. I've cleaned up that part of my mind. I put the goal in and carry on. You never cancel a goal because there's anything wrong with it. You cancel it if you recognize that when you load it in your mind, it resonates some form of hostility or fear for you to work through, and you utilize that as an opportunity to work through it.
So you must choose to take responsibility for your feelings and what goes on inside of you if you are ever going to change the patterns in your life and heal.
And you've got to be open to change. You know, for things to change, you got to change. There's a cute cartoon that somebody posted on my Facebook page a while back, and it shows this what looks like probably a politician standing in front of a large group of people saying, hey, we're going to have change, we're going to have change. How many want change? Everybody's throwing their hats up in the air. Everybody's all excited. And then the next frame, this question is, and how many want to change? Everybody's heads tipped down. They're looking at their feet. Like, if you want your life to change, stop telling everybody else they need to change and change your mind, change your thinking, change your life. That's what this work is about. Because it all starts with the creative urge, which is mind energy. And it literally becomes your physiology. You get to live with it. Every pained perception, every time there's some sort of perceptual pain, you know, oh, they hurt me, whatever. That's a reflection of a literal dis-ease in tissue. Every disease in tissue is a reflection of pain perception, mind energy. And you got to clean it up. So that's what this work is about. Let's move to the next one.
How will you create change in your thinking to what you do want?
Well, a big and important, you know, it's a two-part process. A big and important step is doing the forgiveness work and removing what you don't want, and then taking time each day to cultivate your relationship with yourself as love, to cultivate your connectedness to that space of love in you. It's sort of a two-part process. You come from both directions. You know, you don't want to spend so much time in forgiveness that you never spend time functioning as love. And you don't want to spend so much time trying to function as love that you never deal with the underlying issues and fail. So it's a two-part process. Take time each day, you know, good thing to do before you get out of bed in the morning. Just breathe a little bit and connect to the presence of love in you. Let every cell in your structure, make this a habit. Let every cell in your structure link and connect to love, which is its power supply. When you do that, your physiology will upgrade. Your perception will go to a whole new place, and life will move in ways you can't even imagine. Words could never say.
In chapter 3, if your perception is limited, you can experience something that never happened except as a perpetual reality in your mind. The reality is present in a mind, and words used represent those realities tend to be limited by the experience of that mind.
And so we offer a parable in this chapter. And it's the parable of the two-dimensional creature. And let's imagine we want this two-dimensional creature to play basketball with us. And a two-dimensional creature knows only length and width, knows nothing of height. So if I pass a basketball through the two-dimensional creature's space, what does a two-dimensional creature experience? Well, she experiences the first edge of the basketball, the beginning. The second, a slice, a slice, a slice, a slice, and the last edge of the basketball. What did the two-dimensional creature just invent? They just invented time and space. We experience a basketball. It's one single item, and we experience it all at once. There's no time involved. There's no beginning or end. There's no front edge or back edge. It's just a basketball. The person who lives in a two-dimensional world can't play basketball. If we want this person to be able to play basketball, obviously they're going to have to give up what they believe is true based on living in a world that is short one perception, one dimension of perception. So when we tell this two-dimensional creature that a basketball is not a series of flat planes separated by time. She said, well, who do you think you are? Do I look stupid? I've experienced it. You can't tell me that isn't true. Well, yeah, we know you experienced it, but guess what? It's not the truth. Most people experience pain that never happened, except as an energy that they refuse to be responsible for and refuse to forgive, and therefore tend to pass on to future generations. So we're going to, you think about this Harvard research, 10,000 brain cells are firing 9 bits of data, perhaps a 20 trillion bit world. How many words do you suppose we've got for what's actually happening in the actuality? Well, 2,000 years ago, they asked this man Yeshua questions, and he said, there's so many things I want to say to you, but you can't hear them. You don't have any brain cells for it. And it's like we're living in this 3-dimensional world, but we're short 1 dimension, that 4th dimension, understanding what mind energy does. Like the 3-dimensional or the 2-dimensional creature trying to experience a basketball can't fathom this thing called depth. And at first, it's difficult to fathom what this mind energy, this 4th dimension, does to the whole structure of our lives, of our physiology, of our relationships, of our finances, of our world. So to recognize that if you are short of 1 dimension, you're going to experience things that never happened. And we're going to tell you about, here's the truth. Yes, if somebody came along and punched you in the nose, you got hurt. But all the other hurt that people are talking about that they're experiencing in the world is nothing but a product of perception. And the person who came and punched them in the nose came along because there was a resonance that invited the punch in the nose. Now, does that mean I'm to blame if I'm 2 years old and somebody punches me in the nose? No. But if I'm carrying the genes of a father who was brutal with me and was brutal with his brothers and lived a brutal life, am I carrying the vibration that's going to draw brutality? Yeah. And am I willing to take responsibility and own that? Am I willing to allow myself to access that, bring it forward in the presence of love and dump it and get rid of it? I can do that. It's called forgiveness. But it's a process. And it doesn't happen instantly. And it takes time. So recognize we can experience realities that are not accurate, just like the 2-dimensional creature experienced the first edge of the basketball as a separate event from all the other pieces of the basketball. But that's not true. She experienced it, but it's not the truth. We are short 1 dimension in our function, and therefore we experience all kinds of things that never happened, except in our minds. So perception has reference points for what's actual in the world, but they're so limited at this stage. There's just work to be done to expand our capacity to experience who we really are and what is really going on here, who and what is really going on here. It's a process. We're here to support you in it. You can go to our website, whyagain.org. There's over 20,000 pages. There's all kinds of resources for you to access to support you in this. Radio shows, archives, videos, audios. Download the book, download worksheets. You can go to YouTube, just search Michael Rice on YouTube. We've got dozens of videos there to watch. You can download the app. You can ask questions from the app. 5 days a week from 1 till 2 o'clock Eastern time, and that's 5 hours earlier than London right now. We do a radio show called Mind Shifters Radio. If you have access to US phone service, most people just call into the show. The call-in number for the show is 563-999-3581. So any questions you have, you can call into the show and ask your questions. You can ask your questions in the app. We'll answer it on the radio show and send it to you. If you can't access it by phone, you can listen on your computer to the show. And Yinka, if you've not had any luck getting in through What's the app that's supposed to be on?
Skype.
Skype.
Yeah.
Does that
I
not work?
only tried that day, but I need to try again to see if I can get through on Skype. Because that
Okay,
day,
yeah, it'd be nice to get that working.
yeah. I shall have a go next time I come on. I'll probably be
Yeah,
on
cool.
Sunday.
Yeah. And so one of the first principles of getting your mind to come into alignment with what's actually happening rather than alignment with perceptual constructs that reflect generations of experience that probably aren't true is the willingness to honor truth, to really hold in highest esteem the truth rather than winning or gaining or all the goals that the world gives us. To really honor truth is one of the things, along with forgiveness, that allows the mind to start to open to new insights, new perspectives, flashes of information that are just beyond comprehension. What forgiveness does, now, if you've ever done any reading about near-death experiences, we hear people who say, I had a near-death experience. Well, actually, a near-death experience is not a near-death experience. It's actually a near-life experience. Most people are already dead. If they're living in their 9-bit minds and they think that's the world, they're already dead to the truth of who they are. When physiological death occurs, when this memory system shuts down and collapses, as it does in death, we have the opportunity to experience what's actually happening. That's a near-life experience. So when somebody goes through clinical death and they're drawn back, now I don't suggest this as a pathway to waking up. It's a little risky. But for someone who has that near-death experience, there's a moment where when carbon-based memory just totally collapses, perception totally collapses, there's a direct experience of who you are as love, the being that you are. And you listen, and most people come back with just awesome stories about what they experienced and what they continue to experience. But it's in your life experience. Forgiveness does the same thing in a reliable, consistent, persistent way, but it doesn't do it for 20 minutes or 2 hours as someone who has a near life experience. But at first, it perhaps just collapses your perceptual constructs, maybe just for a second, or maybe even a fraction of a second, and then the mind's right back with its stuff. When you use it, there'll be longer and longer times where it just shuts up. It collapses, and you get to step into the truth of who you are. And as you honor that and bring the truth of who you are forward, everything changes. And that's what our book study is about, is the tools for achieving that result.
This bit is, I ask these questions not to elect answers, but to invite you to suspect everything you think you know or have experienced. Einstein expressed that we live in a 4-dimensional world. Are we missing on perpetual dimensions? Does that keep from experiencing the world as it is actually is? If so, could we study enough, or would we even have any words about the actual world? Are we required to give up all of our experiences from the past in order to step into the truth about life?
You can't stuff enough information in to make perception true. Perception is going to reflect its foundation. If its foundation is hostility or fear, it's going to use corrupt data no matter how much information you stuff in. The secrets are not hidden in the mind, they're hidden by the mind. What happens when a near-life experience happens is people get to be out of their minds. If you want to heal, you got to be out of your mind. What forgiveness does is it collapses the mind, even if it's just for that long at first. And the more time you spend with that thing collapsed, the more you get to wake up to who you are and what your life is really about. That's what we're here to share with you.
My reality is made up of my own mind. As I learn to change my thoughts, reality will change.
Yes. Remember, there's a difference between reality and actuality. The actuality is 20 trillion bit world, what's actually going on. What do you suppose a fly experiences with its compound eyes when it looks into the actuality? I guarantee it's nothing like you or I. What do you suppose a mosquito experiences with its infrared sensors? What do you suppose a dolphin experiences? There's actually a really interesting video, and I don't remember the name of the young man, but if you went to YouTube and put in the words cancer, eyes, boy, and seeing, you'd probably find this video link, and I will find it and I'll send it to you, Yinka. But this is a young boy that I forget exactly what the age of 2 or so or 3. He had cancer and lost both of his eyes. His mother was determined that he was not going to be disabled by that. They showed this kid riding around the neighborhood. He's got no eyes. He's riding around the neighborhood on his bicycle. He's playing basketball and scoring baskets. He's walking down the street with somebody and he says, "Oh, there's a garbage can up there in front of us." True story. What his mother taught him was, much like a whale does with echolocation, his mother taught him to make clicking sounds. By making those clicking sounds and growing up from the age of about 3, using those clicking sounds, his brain would produce pictures of what was out there. He could see the garbage can. He could see the basketball and the net. His brain would produce perceptual constructs based on a totally different energy and information system than sight and sound that we normally think of. He's walking down the street and he goes, "Yeah, there's a garbage can over there." It's like, sure enough. How did he know? Because he so practiced that instead of light energy coming back that would show the garbage can, sound would come back, fire the same brain cells, and his brain would produce a picture of a garbage can. Everything is not as it appears to be. When you start collapsing the constructs based in hostility or fear and function as love, as a human being, you start to wake up. We get to be human. And that's almost unheard of on planet Earth. So it's time.
That story really resonates for me because I was blind for 5 years after my brain injury.
Right.
I couldn't even read the mail, but it was a desire for a book that I wanted, but you couldn't get it on Audible. And to this, like, I didn't know why I wanted the book, and it wasn't a popular book, but I knew that I had to have that book. And literally, that was when it got posted in my letterbox, and I picked it up. I read it in 3 days. It was the first thing. It was, and I could never explain it. Like I could see beyond my own eyes. Because I've had the blood stop behind my eyes for too long. I think they explained it. But I can read now because of that desire for that book since then. Yep. And every book I've picked up, I've been able to read since.
That's called creatorship, young lady. That's what we're here for, to be creators, consciously creating our lives. Nice work. That's awesome. I just looked on my phone, and that video I was talking about is called "The Boy Who Sees Without Eyes." It's just a 3-minute video, but it's pretty powerful.
I shall share it in there. For those that are in the WhatsApp group, I'll share it in there.
Yeah. Cool.
Mm-hmm. I think this may be the last slide. I'm just going to click on it because I don't want to. It's going to. Let me click back on it. This bit is to do a breakout room. What I thought we could do is do a breakout room where you share what you're going to take from what you've learned today, because in talking about it, you remember. Sometimes we take it in, we listen, but when you share it, like since I've created this book club, I understand things at such a different level because I'm sharing what I read, and then I have to interpretate it in a different way so somebody else can understand it. So I thought that we could do a breakout room where if you don't know the people in the room, you can introduce yourself, but share something that you're going to take, something that you've learned from today's session.
Great idea, Yinka. Thank you.
So breakout room. So there you go for those that want to share. Everyone will be back in about 50 seconds.
Yinka?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize I was muted there. So you dropped into our room a couple of times. I was just checking to see if you had a thought or question for us, or if you were just checking on us.
Oh, I was just checking on everyone. That everyone
Okay.
was all right. Yeah.
Cool.
I just tend to flick through the rooms to make sure everyone's all right.
Sure.
So I'm just gonna.
Well, Michael, our group solved all the problems of the world. We're done.
All right. Yay. We needed that.
Yeah. And there was really some really good thoughts expressed in there. The folks in there were
Sweet.
very good. They're actually listening and paying attention to you.
Ah, cool.
Surprise.
Maybe I'll give them a test next time.
That will put us in high beta, Yinka.
Yes, it certainly would. I'm just going to share this last slide. Somebody got TV on or something? So I'm going to share this, just if anybody wanted to donate to Michael and his time that he gives, please donate away. As you know, that Hear My Voice Book Club is always been a donation-based book club, and I would like it all go to Michael if anybody wants to send anything today.
And if you'd like to support this work, basically beyond a very minimalist lifestyle, which my wife and I live, everything goes back into how can we create the next product that will support people in having the tools. So that's what will happen.
We were obviously that energetically connected, because I think that's how I've always done this, run these sessions, is anything that comes in goes back into being able to create even more.
Awesome. Well, that's fabulous, folks. Thank you all. I've enjoyed getting to play, and we'll look forward to what happens in 2 weeks. And in the meantime, please get on the radio show, call into the radio show, get the app, write questions into the radio show. We'll answer them and send you a link to the archives. You can download them, you can pass them on, and any way we can support you, that's what we're here to do.
And we're here the 2nd and 4th Thursday of every month at the 5 a.m. club on a Thursday on the 2nd and 4th of the month. We do to put it into practice, doing the worksheets together.
Fabulous. Nice work, Yinka. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
You are welcome and deserving.
Will Yinka, can I ask, will we, or Michael, will we be doing worksheets on these calls as well on a Thursday evening?
We're gonna go through the book. So that'll be the focus of it. And then we get to chapter 24, we'll be stepping in and talking about the worksheet.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You can come on the 5 a.m. club and have a go on a Thursday.
Yes, I might. You never know. I'll surprise
You sound excited about that, Gina. But you've been guided through the worksheet. You know how to use them. So go for it, girl.
Oh, I'm excited about the worksheets. Yeah, it's getting up at 5 in the morning. And I don't go to bed till really late, you see. So, but anyway, hey.
Well, maybe it's time to go to bed earlier.
Yeah, maybe it's time to get new habits.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
All right.
Early to bed, early to rise. You know how that old saying goes, don't you?
Yeah, so thanks so much, Michael. Thank you, Yinka, as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining it and showing up for yourselves and having a go at this and learning this as well.
All right. Blessings, everyone. Appreciate you. Take care.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Blessings
you.
and love.
Bye.
Bye.